Great to see you again, Sid, after all this time. We're now on episode 29. We're now picking up the thread. We've not been talking to each other for quite some time. You notice that by the different outfits we're wearing. We're now going on to the 29th album in our collection. A fabulous magazine again. We'll talk about this magazine. The album Under the Red Sky by Bob Dylan. And just to start that discussion, I'm going to cast your mind back, Sid, to an album, an earlier album you loved. I'll show you the album. This was the 1985 album, Empire Burlesque. And there's a number of things you can tell about Bob Dylan albums straight away that mean you aren't going to like them very much. First of all, is if by some weird, there's a lyric sheet. On all his top albums, there's never a lyric sheet. So if a lyric sheet gets on, there's something gone wrong somewhere in the universe. Secondly, this album, as we remember, it's got Jim Keltner, Mike Campbell, Ben Montench of the Heartbreakers. It's got Ron Wood on, Sly Dunbar, Robbie Shakespeare, Mick Taylor. It's got all these stars on it. It's got let's say Ron Wood, has been mentioned him, haven't we? All kinds of big name musicians, and that's another bad sign when he has his all-star guests in. And of course, when we were briefly discussing this album in our previous episode devoted to it, we mentioned that this album came out, was peremptorily reviewed by many people, and then was completely overshadowed by this, which was the big archival box set, which started rock and roll's archival box set phase, really. Just bear those three things in mind when you're discussing this record, which we're talking about today, which is called, of course, I'm going to rip off, I love doing this, ripping off the plastic, Under the Red Sky. It's quite a striking photo, Bob. It's not as good a cover as Oh Mercy, which we did for the last episode. Yeah, he's sitting on his porch outside there, you can see him. Let's look inside the package. Let's see what we've got inside the package. Oh no, it's a lyric sheet. That's a bad sign, isn't it? Lyrics on both sides of this. Well, let's look at the instrumental lineups. I'm sure there's no... on his last album, Bob realised that having a small group of musicians focused on the songs in a coherent way. Let's see who's playing on this. Well, the first track is called Wiggle Wiggle. That's a song written by the man who wrote It's All Over Baby Blue. He's written a song called Wiggle Wiggle now. And the guitar on that is played by Slash from Guns N' Roses. And you just think, is there any more inappropriate person to play on a Bob Dylan record? That's the first thing. The second thing is Slash was very excited and surprised to be asked to play on a Bob Dylan record, and gave them a balls out solo, lasted some time, and really lit the track up. When he got the album in his hands and excitedly put it on the thing, he realised his solo had been cut down to one note. So thanks, Slash. Thanks for coming in. So who else plays the guitar on this? Well, quite a few people. There's David Lindley all the way through it. There's a guy called Stevie Ray Vaughan, who at this stage has played on Let's Dance by David Bowie. There's Jimmy Vaughan as well. There's a guy plays a slide guitar solo, which is a very nice solo and isn't cut down to one note, unlike Slash's on the title track. And he's somebody called George Harrison. He plays on it as well. And then we've got Al Cooper. He's back. He's been about 20 years since his last been on a record. He's back now. Who plays the keyboards? Well, on most of them, it's Bruce Hornsby, who had a few hit records around this time. But on the track 2x2, a piano part on that, it's Elton John. Elton John's playing piano on it. And then you get Randy Jackson from the Jackson 5. He plays quite a lot of the bass on this record. And there's Jim Keltner, obviously, and there's Kenny Aronoff. Actually, is Jim Keltner on this one? He probably is. He usually is. Paulino da Costa. It's a crowd of thousands. And this album was pretty peremptorily reviewed by most people. And a few months later, we got this, which was the Bootleg series, volumes 1, 2, and 3, which is an archival set that got absolutely rave reviews and completely overshadowed it. I don't know if this sounds like history repeating itself to you, but it does to me. It sounds like this is the new Empire Burlesque, an album, a label, sorry, you wouldn't want to apply to your album if you made one this week, would you? Anyway, let's go into a bit more detail, because we all love that with Bob. Well, this is produced by Was Not Was for some fucking reason. Why don't you just ring up Dang Lenoir again? I don't know. There's enough songs on here that were recorded by Dang Lenoir, and he's re-recorded in worse versions on here. So let's look at the producers. It says produced by Don Was and David Was and Jack Frost. Now, Jack Frost I don't know who the hell he is. I mean, who is Jack Frost? Who can tell? But he's a mystery man who's around Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan, of course, being Bob's real name, he wouldn't use false names, so it can't be Bob, can it? But anyway, let's go into the songs. Wiggle Wiggle. This is the greatest lyricist in rock history, George Harrison. My favourite verse in Wiggle Wiggle is wiggle, wiggle, wiggle like a bowl of soup. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle like a rolling hoop. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle like a ton of lead. Wiggle, you can raise the dead. Now, that's genius, isn't it? I mean, that's why that's one of the most memorable and much covered songs Bob Dylan's ever written. And other incredibly shit songs on this record. Let's be blunt. The production is completely unmemorable as well. The production is like off-the-shelf IKEA production, I think. It's a TV talking song, music and lyrics by Bob Dylan. That's bollocks, isn't it? He's in Hyde Park Corner. He's in fucking Hyde Park Corner. Stay away from London if you're going to write songs like this, Bob. And basically, television's pretty bad for you. I don't believe that. I've watched loads of telly, and look at me. I'm fantastic. So the entire premise behind the song is, as far as I see it, bollocks. Then we've got Unbelievable. It is unbelievable how little happens musically in that few minutes, however long that is. I could tell you. Once there was a man who had no eye. No, I'm not going to quote it at all. 10,000 men went on a hill. Oh dear. 2 by 2. I think Elton John plays some quite nice piano on that, but I can't remember the song. I've played this dozens and scores of times, so I don't know. I quite like the last 2 tracks, Handy Dandy and Cats in the Well. Handy Dandy is particularly good, I think. There's got to be a good one eventually. And there are other good songs. There's 2 songs originally recorded for Oh Mercy. He always got quite a few songs up his sleeve. One of them is rubbish. God Knows. That was pretty bad when Dan Lenoir produced it. We heard the outtake a few years later in the Bootleg series. But however bad it was certainly better than this version. This is shit, you know. And then we've got a lovely song, Born in Time, which has got a lovely tune. But this version just leaves me cold. And if you hear the Lenoir production, it's actually beautiful. You know, he does a beautiful recording of that song, and I think if he's putting Disease of Conceit on, he should have put Born in Time on Oh Mercy, really, and particularly when he's putting it on this load of rubbish. This is proof, if anything, that for the time being at least, Oh Mercy was a bit of a false dawn, I think, because he's gone back straight in the studio with this record, which came out in the year after, 1990, and he's made some of the biggest mistakes of his career in terms of choosing the producer and in terms of choosing the songs. And these are exactly the mistakes that buggered up a lot of his albums in the 80s. And now we're in a new decade just starting. There's actually an interesting paragraph in this snapshot. I wonder where they've got that picture from, by the way. I mean, this is a snapshot. They must have really dug about for that. I mean, I don't know if you see the cover there, but that's the picture they've chosen. Wow. But if anyone was seeing that, thank God we're seeing that nowhere else in this packed magazine. Oh, hang on. It's there as well. It's the only picture of Bob in the entire magazine is the album cover. I'm sure there must have been some other pictures of him taken that year. I mean, come on. Yeah. Anyway, there. But it says two interesting points. One of which I knew, and one of which I didn't. But here it says, years later, Dylan would confess that the record featured too many personnel, and that Don and David lacked production experience. Nevertheless, it reached 38 on the US Billboard chart and number 13 in the UK chart. But both those, I think both of those, well, I know, both of those chart placings are below the chart placings of Oh Mercy, which did considerably better than that, you know, in both sets of charts, for a while at least. The other thing about it is some of these lyrics, I've mentioned Wiggle Wiggle, that's very childish lyric, isn't it? And there's a reason for that as well. Another one is the title track, which actually is another good tune. The reviews for this album actually were so bad that I didn't buy it. I'd bought Oh Mercy. I didn't buy this album for years. And the reason I bought it was in 2005, I went to see Bob in Nottingham. And I never heard the song Under the Red Sky, and he just played it halfway through. And you can never tell what he's saying, you can never tell what he's singing. Well, I knew that's Under the Red Sky. He keeps saying Under the Red Sky, and I could hear every word. And he sang it at the piano, and it was lovely, and it was better than this. But there was a little boy and there was a little girl, and they lived in an alley under the red sky. It sings that twice. There was an old man and he lived in the moon. One summer's day he came passing by, you know. And it's all lyrics like that. Well, the reason for this and the reason for Wiggle Wiggle is for some of these songs, his imagined audience is his new, very young daughter. He's writing children's songs, and he's not told anyone. One of the strange things about this is Entertainment Connections. This is on the album notes. Has secured a limited edition of notes by the artists to the song that appeared on the album Under the Red Sky. If you are interested in receiving this collector's item, please write to Entertainment Connections, 527 3rd Avenue, Suite 232, New York, NY 10016, for information how to place your order. I've never seen a copy of that, and I don't know anyone's ever quoted it, but maybe that doesn't exist. Maybe that's just a thing he's put on, because it says here also about the album design. It says something like there's an imaginary design company for this. Something called Camouflage Design. They don't exist. So, you can never tell. But anyway, I think this is a dreadful record. I think this is a bloody useless record with three or four good songs on it that are buried under. It sounds like an 80s production as well. It sounds like overproduced, overstaffed record. And after Oh Mercy, I must say I expected more than this. What did you think of it?
Oh, well, the difficulty I have is that I can't tell the difference between what you describe as a terrible album and what you describe as a brilliant album, because they sound pretty much the same to me, with some obvious differences. But here's a controversial opinion, i.e. not very. I thought Wiggle Wiggle was great, and I'm not saying that ironically. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't what I was expecting, and it has an honesty about it. Anything about, the great lyricist, well, I don't give a fuck about Dylan's great lyrics. To me, they're not that great. And there's an honesty to Wiggle Wiggle. There's an absolute honesty. I didn't know anything about writing the song for the child. I guess that makes a lot of sense. But and I suppose it also says something about Dylan thinks he can. The thing about that is Dylan thinks he can just peddle any old crap and people will still buy it. I think there's a lot of that goes on in Bob Dylan world. And you know, that's fair enough. I mean, I think it sounds very tired. It sounds like
sounds like it can't be asked.
The main thing about, but to be fair, as I said at the start, it often sounds very tired, and yet it's often I read or hear that it's a work of genius. With this one, it does sound. I mean, it does sound very like it sounds like there's not much in it anywhere.
Yeah.
And Don, the Was Not Was team, have put all the fucking stardust they can find in the studio and ordered some more in to try and sort of put some glitter on the turd. I think albums like that are hard on the ear.
Yes.
I should say that for me, 99% of all Bob Dylan albums are hard on the ear, but not necessarily for those reasons. Whereas this one, I just thought, well, it does sound dated in a way, bizarrely, in a way that remember 29 episodes ago when we put on the first.
I'm afraid I don't.
When we put on the first Bob Dylan album, which you're going to tell me was recorded in 1963
to 2, 3, something like that. Before that.
You might expect those early Bob Dylan albums to sound dated, but of course they don't.
No.
They sound.
I definitely think that this and Empire Burlesque and other albums from the 80s sound much more dated than the 60s albums.
That's because, as you don't need me to tell you, that's because they've shoehorned, almost whatever the latest production technique is, and also this ridiculous guest list. And I think as somebody who doesn't know really anything about the Dylan world, I do subscribe to your thesis, which is the more people on it, the worse it's likely to be. I think you're right about that. I think Dylan works best, if he can be said to work at all. I think Dylan works best in a kind of a limited. The reason why Blonde on Blonde sounds great and admittedly is a great album, is because there's like 5 blokes in the room or 5 people in the room. Or thereabouts.
Often playing live.
Very
and no jiggery pokery.
Whereas many of the other later stuff, and since we're talking about this one, I think you're right. I think there is a tiredness to some of the songs. The song about TV Talking Song. Again, it made me think of early Bob Dylan. It made me think that if that remember. I can't remember the names of them now, but I'm sure in one of the early albums there's I can't remember what it's called, but is there something about a talking blues or something like that?
But
and those I think were intentionally humorous.
Yeah, but to be funny, this is a hectoring, tired rant that isn't funny or memorable.
So I wondered if TV Talking Song was a kind of a deliberate attempt to do that. So actually, TV Talking Song is a funny song, and Bob's having a laugh with us, and we're too poor-faced to realise it. The congregation of Bob.
It's not funny though, is it? When Bob wants to be funny, he can be very funny, both in person and on albums. And he's not. It doesn't make me smile. It doesn't make me laugh.
That could just be because you're a humorless bastard, but I'm
often called that,
as many have said. But
you said it many times.
Many times. and to be honest, I wasn't joking when I said I liked Wiggle Wiggle. I genuinely liked it.
I respect your opinion,
but I liked it because it's just as honest as the day is long. It's dead simple.
It reminds me. This reminds me of when he wrote that song "God Gave Name to All the Animals" with the daft rhymes about pigs and dogs and bears on them. You know, one of the backing singers' child was in the studio when he was recording that, and he wrote more and more of it because he was making the child laugh.
Yeah.
And he was really liking the laughter of the child, and the rhymes were so obvious. Guess they call it a pig, and the kid was just burst out laughing whenever he got to this obvious rhyme. So that's why that track, it brought back those memories of that for him when he played it back or put that on. And this one, he's written this song before he obviously gets to the studio, but he's playing that song in the way that Paul McCartney often writes songs to make his kids laugh.
Yeah.
And at this time, he secretly got married to one of the backing singers who was in the gospel tours, Caroline Dennis, and they've moved into a house somewhere in Los Angeles, I think, and they've had a daughter. And this album is in fact dedicated to her, but no one knew who he was on about when they read the dedication, because the marriage was only revealed in this century. It was only revealed. It was real more than 10 years after this album came out. Nobody knew he was married in the public. So it said, "For Gabby Goo Goo." And that is, I think her name's Gabrielle, the daughter. And she was dead young. You know, she barely talked, you know, so that's how old she was. And that's what he used to call her. Yeah. And he dedicated this entire album to her. Poor little girl. I mean, he should have dedicated one of his good albums to her. But you know, it's an interesting insight in the fact that he is probably thinking more about the little girl than he is about the album, to be honest.
But I think so much of what Dylan puts out, like officially in the album sequence, I mean, I think so much of what he puts out is very often kind of, it seems, you know, a sort of a match between contractual obligation and whatever shit he can throw at it. You know, and sometimes that shit is good shit, and sometimes it's bad shit. But pretty much, you know, he doesn't care.
Well, we've been through a phase now where that might be true. We've been through the 80s, and I must say at this point that this is another particular low point. This album, and these mistakes are not repeated again. He doesn't ever have an all-star cast after this. He doesn't ever, in terms of this album, where you've got Elton John coming in and George Harrison's coming in and Slash, and that's never going to happen again between then and now.
Yeah.
And we are going to. He realizes this album isn't very good, and what happens after this is he breaks everything down. It's a long time. It's 7 years between this and the next album of new songs, but there are 2 albums in between where he just plays old songs, not his own old songs, other people's old songs, acoustically. And what he is trying to do in that period is, what am I doing this for? He's getting back to basics. And I think because of that, you know, to go from this, which is a mess of an album with too many people and too many stars, to 2 albums where there's only him in a room singing and playing the guitar, is a statement of intent. And from that, that's the platform on which he builds the next late period, which is a new period after this. None of his later albums sound like this.
Yeah.
And I think this is, he's come through the 80s and he's had enough.
I'll be interested to see if I can hear the difference. I'm not saying it to be smart, but I genuinely struggle sometimes to hear, you know, the difference between a bad Dylan album, so-called, and a great Dylan album. It's a distinction that often baffles me. But you know, I don't say that like to try and be snarky. It's just I genuinely.
I think you're being snarky.
No, I genuinely can't read the difference often. But yeah, what's the one track you would pick from this?
Jesus.
You
You always ask
you-
the difficult ones.
You
Let me
mentioned
look at the track list.
you mentioned
Let me look
Cat
at the
and the
track list.
Well. Handy
No.
dandy.
I think it's handy dandy. That's
Good.
what I'd pick. What do you pick?
I'm going to go with Wiggle Wiggle because for two
Yeah,
reasons.
you like that one, don't you?
One is it just immediate kind of great album opener, I thought. And it is the shortest song on the record.
Is it?
It is. It happens to be the shortest song on the record. So
you are looking at the timings of the tracks now and factoring it into your favourite track decisions.
I'm not so much looking at the timings of it. I'm just looking at the external world and my sense of ennui. And if the ennui and the why am I here? Why is existence the way it is? And can I check out anytime soon? That usually kicks in around about 3 minutes into Dylan. And Wiggle Wiggle faded out or went, and I was still alive in the world without wanting to leave it. So that's how I know it's the shortest song on the album. What's the next album that we're going to listen to in this odyssey of Dylan?
It's an odyssey. It's an
engagement.
epic journey. The next album is our 30th episode. Episode 30. We're going to have a small party to celebrate. Perhaps there's some buffet and trestle tables involved. And the next episode, episode 30, Sid, we'll be discussing Good As I've Been to You.